to Masters of Influence, a premier video show where we share the success journeys of the elite and learn about the pivotal moments and decisions that shape their paths to prominence. I'm your host, Nancy Erickson. I work with high net worth individuals, CEOs, and business leaders, and I give them a white glove, really hands-on experience to write, edit, publish, market, and distribute their books worldwide. I'm the owner of Stonebrook Publishing, an award-winning publishing house that publishes nonfiction works. Today, my esteemed guest is Tony Siebers. Tony is the CEO of Family Media and Technology Group and the founder of its subsidiary flagship brand, Parent Projects, and I hope we're going to talk a lot about that. He's a contributing member of the Forbes Nonprofit Advisory Council and an expert in public and private partnerships. He's a nationally credentialed senior move manager, senior real estate specialist, and a licensed realtor in Arizona. Tony is a former law enforcement and military officer with decades of crisis management and team building expertise. Tony, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Nancy. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, well, I just want to let our audience know who you are and really how you're using your influence now to impact the world. So let's start from the beginning. Tell us about your growing up years. Where are you from and what was your family life like?
I hail out of Oregon, between Portland and a little community called Thurston or Springfield, which is tucked up against the mountains, where the mountains spill out into the valley. Mm-hmm. Awesome place to grow up. Great, surrounded by a great group of family, and was there until I really graduated from high school, and then went into the military. Not straight into the military, but into a military commissioning school, into a military college, in order to kind of set off into that direction of life.
Yes. So what military college was it?
I went to Kemper Military College. And for those of us who might be a little aged like I am and grew up in Boy Scouts and Boys Life, it was that ad off of the back of our Boys Life magazine growing up is an old school that had been founded in 1844 and was pretty much everything of tradition and what you get out of that, the east side of America, we really didn't see a lot of when I was growing up on the west side of America.
Yeah. So where is that, Tony?
The school's in Boonville, Missouri.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I was thinking Missouri.
You know that?
I know Boonville. I live in St. Louis, and we're very close to Boonville. Yeah. And there's Kemper everything, especially in Kansas City. There's a lot of Kemper arena and all those kinds of things. So that's very cool. That's cool. Yeah. So was that
at the time would circle Boonville when they would write me, when I could get them to write me.
It's very tiny.
It's hilarious.
So was that like high school?
That was college. No, that was.
Oh, it's a college. Okay, so I wasn't sure the distinction.
Yeah, no, it was college. When I actually approached the military concept, it was out of the blue. I never planned to do it, but there, Iggy Ignacio was a CW5. He was a personal bandmaster and a musician. I was a musician. That's what I thought my life was going to be.
What's your instrument?
My principal was trumpet and brass, but I'm trained in conduction and direction. So I went to Kemper really to earn my way into a commission to direct Army bands. Yeah, which were really the best way to go at the time. And the Army, to the needs of the Army, changes a lot, and it did pretty quickly over the first couple of years. And that ended up being moved from the commissioned officer sources of lieutenants and et cetera into being warrant officer specific. And so by the time I got to graduation, I had a choice to make. I could kind of wander off and go to a different direction since the military had changed, or if I really liked this leadership thing, I could finish up school, get a degree that I could really promote within. And I did. I loved it. Returned back to Oregon. Eventually found myself assisting and teaching ROTC and working with the ROTC battalion there because I was a lieutenant, and working with an Army Reserve unit as well in the area, and then finishing a degree in political science. So I kind of got that a little bit of an what I was hoping for at that University of Oregon experience, but at that time it was a little different. I'm a lieutenant. There's much different expectations in attending college.
I'm asking. Well, so what came next?
Well, the military, because of how all that came through, I got forced branched into the military. They picked where I
What
was
does
going to
that
land.
mean? Force branched.
Meaning really they picked what branch they felt was going to be best and where I was going to land and to serve. And the branch that I got selected into was called the Chemical Corps. I honestly, I struggle, like math and science, I struggled to keep my attention in it. So I did not know what dates. I was a political science guy, like I could have, but I figured it out pretty dang quickly. So that branch, because its expertise is essentially weapons of mass destruction, emergency management, is the easy way to look through it. But a lot of that takes a political savvy, because you have to be briefing generals, presidents, and others about, hey, this is what happened. This is what your choices are for avoidance, for decontamination of units. Do you go through that? You're weighing and managing these PhD, soldiers with PhDs in science, and you've got to compile and move this and explain things at multiple levels of sophistication up and down a command chain. And what a blessing. It is not where I thought I was going to go. It was absolutely where I was supposed to be.
So
And
where were you serving? Is it in the United States, or was it on other foreign lands?
All over. So originally, coming out of the schools and things, my opportunity was really on the backside and in the work off of 9/11. And we knew we needed a better way to respond to that. And I got thrown on the team at the National Training Center in Florida, in the middle of the desert in California. And I got this opportunity there to start working on what policy and procedure would look like. How do we respond to these types of things specifically? How do you use, that's where I kind of wet my whistle on how to use the National Guard, which is a state level asset, and the military. How do you use that effectively in times of national crisis and emergency? And so that would eventually lead me into a group of the military called the National Guard Bureau, which is a cohort that isn't actually in charge of all the National Guards. Each National Guard belongs to its state governor, but it organizes all of those units and uses them to bridge military assistance in the civilian world and around other things that sit out there.
Okay, so how long did you serve in that military position?
My military career was around 12 years, a little over 12 years.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the end of that, we had Hurricane Katrina, and I got that opportunity. It was one of the first times we had really put more than pen to paper. We hit the ground. I was in the 9th Ward. We had troops that we really had to execute. It was the first time, really. We had really executed the National Incident Management System as we know it today, from what we used to have previously that we experienced kind of 9/11. And it was a really, it actually plays into what we do today. The basis of it was that whoever starts in charge stays in charge. And instead of the next organization coming over and taking over, at a bottom line, it's how do you effectively layer in, a county over a city and a state over a county and a federal over the top of that, but while taking advantage of those people that were at the base. And
it's hard to make stuff like that efficient in government, especially.
Well, it's about communication. I mean, think of some of the technical, roadblocks we had to overcome were honestly money and communication. So everybody got paid a different way from a different system, pot of money, legislated, regulated differently. We literally had to invent what we called purple money. The Air Force got paid in blue money and blue dollars, and they did that differently. The Army paid in green dollars and green. So
what does that even mean? What's purple money? I know what green dollars are. Those are the kind I like.
Well, similar in the way nonprofits might be, the government has restrictions in how it can spend money, right? We've set you have to have a justified need, a bona fide need, and then a program that does that, and you follow that way to do it. Well, the Air Force it takes roll call, if you will, and it pays people based on a days of service. The Army doesn't. It splits it into 2 4-hour blocks with its National Guard. And you wouldn't think that that's a big difference, but when Congress goes to put a pot of money together and to physically pay people, it becomes a problem. And so those things, or communicating when the county would come on, or the state would come on, or a federal government comes on, they use different frequencies, if not even different radio systems altogether.
So what's that like? Do you know what that's like now? Has that been streamlined?
Yeah, we had to resolve those problems, and really Katrina was one of the first times that we got to now play that out and try those technologies that did those things, and we just refined it and gotten better and better. Today, with what we do, a lot of, I know we'll talk about parent projects a bit, but that experience, those frustrations, they led me to be able to see the same frustration in family communication. Like, how do you go take that first person with the passion that jumps in to help an aging parent and then suck them out and throw somebody else into that? Is there a way instead you can layer on support in a way that's logical? Is there a way that you increase communication between siblings when one uses text or one uses email or one is checked out for one reason or the other? And so it was, again, I was forced branched. So it wasn't something I ever planned to do. It just was what I was supposed to do.
Just like at other people's meandering paths, you go in all these different directions and you find it a later point and you're like, it all comes together. You needed that experience to be able to do what you're doing now. So I want to ask you about your the law enforcement portion of your life. What was that?
That's as a kid, it's what I thought I would end up into. And when I got out of the military, I went to work at a big corporation, helping them with Project Rescue, right? Where they had big projects, multi-million-dollar projects that were having a challenge. And I brought with this heart, okay, well, I'm going to go here. This is where I'm going to land. I'm going to thrive. It's going to be awesome. Got into it, completed that project, and realized really quickly they needed me to move. It was a lot like the military, which is the stability me and my family were trying to gain right away. Like within a year and a half, they're like, okay, we'd like you to go to Sacramento because we just bought this new brand.
And you were in Oregon?
I was in Oregon, and my wife was going to law school. We were having our first baby. It was like life is just kind of steadying into that. Our military service was in the National Guard. We were trying to settle out and steady the ship. That a friend called and said, hey, our local department's hiring. You always wanted to do it. Like, come do it. Come try it with me. And he knew that I was frustrated by this move. I went from making like 90 grand a year at that time to making like $31,000 a year with a pregnant wife, finishing law school, right? I mean, she was a trooper and a saint. To really
not to mention that your pregnant wife probably wasn't very excited about you carrying a gun and looking for bad guys.
I mean, the reality is carrying a gun was a part of my life already and had
been right.
So
but you, in your role in the military, you weren't exactly in harm's way, right?
I was there after an emergency, right? I was there after an emergency, putting stuff back together and working through. Now that said, as we get into deployments and I end up in Iraq and working through all that, well, that things really changed in that. My last command down range, really at that point in time, coming back at that 11 and 12 year mark too, my family was like, okay, we're good. But so law enforcement was what I thought was a sidetrack off of that side. God bless those that sit through that. I was I think a captain, an early captain in the military at the same time. Got into that, worked it, loved a lot of that. It wasn't the right department and a fit for where that was going to go. But the experience that I got off of that made me so incredibly effective in the national emergency side that when that end opened up and they're like, hey, there's a full-time position here. You can do this. Like, we know what to do with this. It gave me this perspective. Now, all of a sudden, not only did I understand the context of how we handled an emergency, I knew what it was like as a police officer to physically drive up and have to deal with like 0 to N hour when the rest of the cavalry shows up, and how depleted you are and what that feels like for the fire departments. And that made me a better leader, and it made me more effective, I think, at that time.
Well, it's quite different from what you're doing now, Tony. So how did those roads intersect? Because you're really dealing with building communication systems out for people with aging parents, which is brilliant. And I really want to hear the details about that. But how did you get there?
Coming off the backside of the war, I came back and ended up helping other companies with their challenges. Most of them, their challenges were a service organization that they had started in the solar industry or in higher education or in ambulance services, right? That are in our communities. And those organizations all had new service capability that needed to be done, but the structure of the organization maybe was rejecting that new service organization. It didn't fit in the culture. One thing didn't work after another. That honed me in to the service industry and the difficulties. Even though we all think we look alike, that we provide a service, delivering services and how we talk about it and where the connections come through led me to understand that when you buy, unlike buying a widget from somebody, when you buy a service from a company, it's a much different type of interaction. The trust level looks different. If it's done authentic, like you're looking for that. You don't want to be sold, especially that, right? You want to be engaged and understand the mission and what that felt with. That sat as a backdrop at the moment in 2015. I was helping an older family member. I'd been asked by my family to go check on an older family member in the hospital, by my grandmother in the hospital. And when I got up there, you know, I was in my 30s, in my mid 30s. I had no idea what retirement was. I was waiting for the Social Security fairy to sprinkle that. Like I would figure that stuff out later.
Yeah.
But I have this part of service, I have law enforcement curiosity, right, and skill set. Right. And as I got into it, I recognized the challenges that she was facing were pretty much because she had built this buffer around her, and nobody knew how to communicate about it. Nobody knew what to do at that point of an emergency, even though everybody intended well. We really had a communication and an organization problem. I also know, well, there's other real things that happen around that time. My work with nonprofits, my volunteer work with nonprofits led me to see that more and more people were depending on the federal government for these entitlement programs that we were to.
Tony, we need to stop. You lost your internet and I can't hear you about every other word you said. Are you there? Oops.
Oops.
We lost your internet, I think.
I think we did.
Okay, so
I'm here. I'm here.
But now your camera is off. Okay, so I'm just going to ask you the question before you start talking. Okay, so take a breath. We're good. We can edit. Okay. So all your military service and all is quite different from what you're doing now. How did you get where you are working with Parent Project?
I'll say the same way that actually most families get into a Parent Project. And Parent Project being helping an older parent from, little advice to everything else. I had a grandparent that was struggling, was up in the hospital. My family asked if I would go check in on the situation.
Yeah.
That background in that law enforcement skill set, that curiosity to kind of dig and to understand. And I got up there and everything that a lot of us find really frustrating and wrong, like got stuck in a hospital behind all these other people without an advocate. So she was stuck in the ICU waiting 3 days for a stress test, right? Like paying 3 times as much as she should be. because they knew she could. And on the other side, she just didn't have an advocate. All those little things that,
sick, right? She's in ICU, so she can't advocate for herself.
she can't. Right. And because of the way that nobody chose to ignore, to look over something, but in general, everybody just thinks everything's good. And so there's enough shiny stuff in the world to pay attention to that you tend to not to until you do. So all of a sudden you're there.
Yeah.
So that, by the way, oftentimes looks a lot like an emergency. It looks a lot like an emergency. So, I went up and dealt with that parent project situation, and not even knowing what that was. I mean, not even understanding. I didn't know what Social Security was. I didn't know what Medicaid was.
You're in your 30s, right? So
right.
You sure aren't thinking about any of that. You just know you have to pay into it and then let it go, right?
Yeah, that's right. At this point in time, I know it comes out of a paycheck, and someday the Social Security fairy will sprinkle the knowledge on my head, and I will understand it. And, that will all work out. I had no idea that the first time I would need that information would be for a loved one. And same even for my parents at that time. So anyhow, the moment comes and goes, and we discover these challenges. I come down, I'm having a conversation with the family. And the response that I got out of raising, well, there's a problem up there, we probably need to go deal with it, was not a typical response. It was an emotional response out of the family. And I really lamented on that. I really thought a lot about that, took that into my office, my morning prayer time the next day. And all of a sudden I realized, holy cow, they don't know what to do. Parents don't know what to do. Like that's a
thing.
That's a thing. And then I thought about it. I'm like, well, I don't know what to do. Do I need to know what to do? Like, how fast can that change? And then you start looking, you're like, well, how old were they when their parents went down, and the realities of that world come together? Okay. There's enough shiny stuff also during that time to make me stop paying attention at that and go over to this thing. I didn't even.
What do you mean by that? What was distracting you? What was
at that time, life. I've got 5 children, right? I've got games.
You went from your wife being pregnant to having 5 children.
Yeah, because who doesn't do that? Come on now. There are, life had really set in, and so there's a lot going on there look, this is 2015, 16. This is before Instagram could suck up every waking moment that it could grab off of me, or TikTok or whatever, someone's whatever.
You still don't have time for that. So
exactly. So anyhow, what I kind of say is that led me to understand, oh my gosh, wow, other people have a problem. I went out, the way that I'd solved problems before for service companies, like when I'd gotten out of the military, I went and helped really big companies help launch new service companies when it needed a different aspect. So you're an ambulance company that's got to grow a fire department. You are a solar manufacturing company that now has to build a solar power plant. These are, your culture is not built to accept these other new arm, but it's an important part of what's got to happen. Those perspectives, as well as my perspective in the military and emergency management, led me to believe that at scale, when things didn't work the way that we expected, and I saw this in Iraq, and I saw this in the 9th Ward and Katrina, when the government doesn't work, when it's insolvent, when it can't pull itself together, when it's in crisis, people do. Like families do. They niche up to the family level. They put on their pants and their shoes, and they do. And they're open to advice. Like, what do I do next? What do I do next? Where does that go? And I found my own family in that situation. The people that we turned to that had a great voice, they didn't necessarily have a voice that scaled. And that opened the opportunity of my call.
Did you mean like when you were reaching out for help with your, loved one, elderly loved one who was like at a distance?
Right. Distance was my catalyst. We needed to overcome distance. And what I've learned is there are catalysts that do get families to push through the noise and start acting. And that you can talk to people all day long about why they should set up stuff for their kids. and why they should make it easier, or why you should engage this conversation. But I'm going to tell you right now, after having thousands of companies look at this, they're all frustrated with the same thing. We don't know the magic words to get the family to like act and to work because they're distracted and they don't know where to go. But what we do know is if we put our eyes on when a family member deals with that debt issue, that distance issue, that late in life divorce where they have to split mom and dad's money now between two households, a new disability, a new diagnosis of something, right? These are a death of a loved one, of dad. And now mom who's never written a bill or paid a check now has to figure those things out, or is going to sell the house, but she wasn't a part of buying the house. Dad did that all alone. And who's going to help her walk through that? When somebody walks through that catalyst, that is a moment of opportunity. And to us, we were able to build parent projects around that, organize businesses around those moments, the same way that we organized the military.
Yeah. So tell us what Parent Projects is, because we've kind of talked around it, but you all do something very specific.
Yeah, Parent Projects is a platform, a commerce platform. It's a group of businesses, really, that have committed to approaching families differently. We call it attraction over promotion. It is sitting back and watching for when a family encounters one of these crises or a catalyst, and when they start movement, one of us uses our platform, and we give the platform to the family and say, wow, you're coming to see me to do the will, and I can see there's a lot going on. Here is a platform to help you just organize yourself.
So it's like a website, right? Where the families are participants?
Today it's a web platform designed specifically for the adult children of aging family members that are trying to get through what's coming at them.
So I want to talk about some of the features of that, because you and I talked before we did this broadcast about how I have a 91-year-old mother. She actually lives 1 mile from me, so the distance is not an issue. But oh my gosh, I looked at her end of life papers, and her living will looked great. I saw exactly what she wanted to do. It wasn't signed. So, I could do nothing with that. So, we've been, in fact, tomorrow I'm taking her to sign all of her estate papers again, with an attorney. But one of the things that I appreciate about what you guys have on this platform is I have the ability, my sister lives, 12, 15 hours away up in northern Minnesota. And I have the ability to have a place where all of my mom's important paperwork, her medications, everything, it's a hub that I can put all of that in there, so that my sister and I and my husband and all of the grandchildren have a view into that. So whoever's with her is able to provide what she needs, and they know her, it's like 360-degree view of my mom.
Right.
Who is also starting to decline in her mental capability. So she may not be able to tell people the things that we're able to store in Parent Project.
Well, it's that collection. Look, you're going to do these things. A lot of us don't know you're going to do these things, but we're going to do these things at some point in time. We might only advocate for a parent or go all the way through that edge of life, maybe 2, maybe 4 times with you and your spouse's parents or something. Right. So you don't do this a lot in life, but you really, really don't want to stink at it. Like you don't want to fail at it. You want to be good at it. One of the most common.
It's very stressful. For me, it's a huge mind share of mine right now. My kids are grown and gone, but oh my gosh, my mom needs something every day. And it's a huge mind share. And it helped. What I've been able to do is kind of offload some of that just on my shoulders responsibility and spread out among family members.
One of the things that hit me early was I'll talk into one of mine, and my dad's been okay. We've talked about sharing this, right? So he cared for his parents to the end, with his dad with dementia and his mom with childhood diabetes that came back with a vengeance towards the end of her life. Right about the same time, by the way, she's dealing with my grandfather. And my dad is a restaurant owner, was blessed to be able to do that. He could sell the restaurants and be there and to do this. One of the things that has to be done is he has to take care of his mom and clean clean her. That is emotionally, the impact of that emotionally on him, it was huge, right? And it wasn't until understanding that even little things like that, you'll avoid them until the moment it comes. Believe it or not, there's somebody out there who's fulfilled with helping other people through that challenge. Like, and they're great at it.
Home health workers, yes.
Oh yeah. And that's like they get, like, that's their calling, and they understand this. And to them, it's not emotionally like draining and crushing for years to come, decades to come, right? So, but how do you know that, and how do you learn that? So parent projects, sometimes it's about learning how to push in. How do I not jump in and take over? Because, by the way, usually when I step up, it's because I've got some crisis of balancing that need with my own needs.
Yeah.
And I really need it done quickly. And we can oftentimes be seen as bossy and taking over when the other person's losing. As we get older, it's gonna 100% of us
happen to all of us. Yep.
All right. 100% of us will 100%. And those who believe you keep it together to life, awesome, but you're going to die. And I've never met anyone who could bury themselves. Like, haven't done it yet. So, you learn about, like, you're doing paperwork. I remember the first time I learned, I've got this power of attorney. The banks don't recognize it if it hasn't been done in the last 3 years.
I know. That's right. And the laws are from 2007. I'm like,
all right. And
so what other advantages, or what do you offer families? What else is on there that we haven't talked about yet in terms of your platform?
Yeah, so think through the care planner. And I think understanding, too, where we're going with this, it's the use of technology that makes this happen. Okay, there are a lot of smart people out there who have experience. I have seen, touched, and worked around thousands of parent projects since 2015, since my own in 2015. Dedicated my entire life to it and understanding that. My brain could never handle. If you've seen one parent project, you've seen
they're all different.
One parent project, right? So it wasn't until technology in about 2019 we understood the power of what that was going to be, and where I believe we're going to be able to go with that as a group in a really safe environment. You can't blast out information. It's got to be a safe place. So here's the key tools that we found right now to start with. The first is single place to communicate with your peers and your family members, anybody that might be involved, whether it's the neighbor next door who stops in and does stuff, or it's your brother, and maybe he doesn't even get involved until you're going to be out of town, and he just needs to see that prescription list so he knows, hey, it's this prescription, or it's this one, or something went where they lost a prescription. What's the impact of that? Who do they call to get it? They ran out because you got delayed and couldn't come back from Europe on time. Who do they call to get the next one to work from? Or, who's working on a side effect if they mention it? Those are the things you can't prepare for. But if you're managing your care plan in a place that's visible, you can always bring that person in a safe environment. Yeah. Another big thing was finding the right help. Like I really struggled in our parent projects early. We struggled to find great businesses there especially things like a pool service, right? A simple thing. But I got to tell you, when somebody's doing pool service and they're verified that they work specifically in this niche of seniors or around it, they know that if they see, they look to the house, right? They know what to do. They know how to see something, say something, do something if my dad's on the ground.
Yeah. Oh, right? I see. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They know how to recognize, if I bump my head in the yard and they're out there, a landscaper out here might just kind of let that go. If my dad hits his head on one of these orange trees, they understand at that age, like this could be something that they just need to follow up on. They need to do this in a way that recognizes privacy. They need to not try to upsell. Their sales team needs to be trained to recognize signs of aging and let my dad run his life, but not upsell him if he's in a compromised moment. Those are important.
Like with their financial planners and stuff like that, when they get hold of an elderly person, they can really take advantage of, like churning their stock accounts and creating a lot of fees for themselves.
You now strike on, you mentioned, so I went and got a real estate license, not to practice real estate. I went to get a real estate license because I saw real estate agents as one of the largest hampers and challenges in what this went through. The real estate transaction was by far, for the average American home, it's their largest retirement asset. It's their largest single retirement asset.
Yes.
And the movement of that money for mom and dad is incredibly critical. It's not just for us in our life. We sell a house usually to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's a whole different thing when they're looking to become more manageable and to step down or to move that money appropriately, and how they recapture, how it's going to move to retirement accounts, because money's coming off the table now. Though that transaction has a lot to it. And it, understanding that, you've got a real estate agent, like the ones that we verify and work through, that understands this. They don't go in there just looking for the commission, so they sell it, and now mom and dad have 2 weeks to figure life out. Where are you going to go? How are you going to downsize? How are you going to take a 5-bedroom house down to 2? I watched that happen so many times in frustration. I went and got the National Association of Realtors training on that to get the certification. It did not answer the mail. It started, but I just learned that there was a room for us as an organization and parent projects to also work with these companies and these 98 different industries to understand how to do better and do that.
Yeah. So people can find providers, right, for what they need through the platform. So it's really, can I just ring your bell for a minute? It's really easy to join. You sign up and then it asks you who else is in this care circle, and you just put their email address in and they get information, whenever you update, or they can, log in and view things. And it just, in the brief time, the 1 week since I met you and I've been on it, it's been a really important communication tool. And I'm constantly looking for, I need a driver for my mom. I need, I'm just looking for things like that. And it's nice it's not good to reinvent the wheel, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. And, at the same time, there are things that are standard across the board within our country. If we just look at the United States, but things look a lot different, right? A move, if you are doing a relocation of a loved one who's older, and those are things where there's going to be a dip in their abilities, right? There just is, in their attitude and their aptitude, and it doesn't come back. A lot of it will be a new normal. Those things look different in the middle of winter in Chicago versus San Diego or Portland or Fort Lauderdale or Phoenix, Arizona. So really being able to connect and understand what makes sense across the board, but then connect to somebody who's in your backyard who understands those things, I think really becomes important. And then building also a system where we're learning together. Yeah. So we're able to understand, well, where are these things working? Where are families finding success in this thing, so that these businesses can start providing services in that way that the families need it to go. They're really hungry for that. Yeah. They want to know how to deliver that, but there's not a safe way to do that. We had to create a platform that doesn't share information. Quite honestly, we build our platform using European standards that you have a right to be, right? That you own your information. You decide when it goes, where it goes. You've probably seen it when you've been on. Nobody else the businesses aren't seeing where you're at and where it's coming through. What will happen is when you come to a task that you need help on, and we know a business that's in your local area could help you, it's gonna show you, hey, this is what we've got. This is the information that they say would help them set you up. You send it. Are you ready to go? Here it is. And it's for you at that time. You're in that full control. Was not something the marketplace had. Yeah. That was until now. And our hope is that we won't be the only ones doing that. Over time, people will understand that is the new standard in the way that really information needs to move.
Well, it's a huge and growing market. I mean, it's, where baby boomers are a large part of the population, and it's their turn to age, whether it's in place or in a care home or whatever, but somebody is always in it with them. Somebody needs to be in it with them to help. So let me just ask you a kind of a consolidating question. So Tony, how do you feel like you're using your influence to impact the world?
I tell you, this is the life of service I didn't plan to do. It's the life of service I'm supposed to do.
Very
This
good.
is, yeah, it is. It is absolutely. It's beyond a calling. It has brought into focus this wide array of successes and failures in life as I tried to drive my own bus. I have friends out of the military that looked at me afterwards and they're like, "You move old people?" I mean, we made. General Petraeus made a note in a medal I got once saying I was part of the tip of the spear for how we work counterinsurgency work, right? And
And like you move over.
Man, people cannot reconcile that. And I just wholeheartedly know every day, my gosh, we're about to run from 45 million people on entitlement systems to 90 million in the next 5 years. Okay. They're not all going to be sick, but they're going to have to use these services that are already overwhelmed and having a hard time. The fact that I can use that have that perspective that people will show up, not to write everything off, how that law enforcement mentality of protecting the herd and watching that, it all came into play. And so the best I use my influence is I can galvanize others to follow these companies that are doing the right thing. The best form of leadership that I've always found, honestly, you just did it for me. And I would tell you, anybody else that's out there, what you just showed other people how to follow this movement that I started. And now we've got 15 folks in the staff that are working through this. Like it's way bigger. I will never sit under the shade of what this is going to become. But you showed people how to do that. That is leadership. And so I look to do the same thing for these businesses in their local environments who have said, man, I am going to tackle this differently. I'm not going to become a part of the noise. I'm going to work with others who will identify that family when they hit crisis, and then we'll give them a tool to pull everyone else in when it makes sense for them. I'm going to highlight the heck out of them. I'm going to make them the biggest winners you ever saw because they should be.
Well, it takes a village for sure. And, I always feel like in business that everybody is doing the exact same thing, but in their own lane. And to me, there are two things that people can't live without. And those two things are hope and help. And when you have something like this platform, first of all, it gives you hope that, oh my gosh, I don't have to shoulder this by myself. I can get the help I needed. And then you give us the help by, providing all the services and the different service providers and the hub of information and all. So it's really important. And I really applaud you for what you're doing. So to wrap it up, Tony, I want to ask you a few rapid fire questions to help our audience get to know you in a different way. Are you ready?
Go for it.
Cat or dog?
Cat.
Cat? Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you said that. Nobody ever says cat. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Coffee. Summer or winter?
Winter.
Winter. Netflix or movie theater?
Movie theater.
Casual night in or fancy night out?
Casual night in.
Okay. Window or aisle seat?
I'm an aisle seat guy. Too tall.
Are you? Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Both.
Both? You're burning the candle at both
Don't tell
ends.
my wife I said that, but I know she's going to see it and she knows it.
You're up early and up late. Okay. Well, you have told us about so many of your capabilities, Tony. What is something that you cannot do? I
can't do any of it on my own. Like, well, I'm here. God's given me this ability and this platform, and I couldn't. This is not one thing that any single human being could do, and I can't shoulder it. So, yeah. That's my number one connection.
Great message for all of us. You can't do it alone. So, Tony, where can our audience find you if they want to connect and learn more?
At Parent Projects, plural. Anything, your favorite social, plug it into your browser, parentprojects.com. At Parent Projects will get you. We're everywhere. You can't miss us.
It'll get you somewhere, right?
Yeah. You're gonna see us somewhere, and from there, then you can decide, what's the best place for you to make that connection. Some people like Facebook, some like email, some
Yeah.
like websites. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're everywhere. That's good. Okay. So thank you again for your time, Tony, and to our audience for your attention. Shifting gears, if you or someone you know wants to write a book, you can find my contact information in my LinkedIn profile. And there's a link to schedule a strategy session with me if you just want to kick around your ideas. So you've been watching Masters of Influence with Nancy Erickson. See you next time.